automating things and creating a digital workforce is all about change management, and it's all about the strategy as opposed to the technology.
Everyone, we have Verity. We've already said hello and how are you, so we won't do it twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No worries, good to be here. And just interesting as well, any person I come across on this podcast, I think it's great to have a contextual understanding of like where you come from, who you are, because it brings a bit of a flavour and understanding of why you have the credibility to speak on what you do. Mm-hmm. So I'd be curious, like, what got you into the content marketing space and being a thought leader and that sort of thing? And
very random. There was no plan involved whatsoever. I grew up in Auckland and right through my life did stuff. Like I was always writing, but it was never my focus. I did debating. I always loved that. I've done lots of musical theatre, and then I went to uni finally and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, but I'd always loved languages. So I studied French and Spanish, came out still with no idea what I wanted to do, and came across this business called Intelligent Inc. So Christina, who started it, knew my sister. They'd gone to uni together, and my sister was like, why don't you talk to Christina and see if that's something you might like to do? And then ended up working with her. And so over the years, we just kind of realized how complementary we were in terms of our skill sets and what we actually like to do. And so, now we've run the business together. And in terms of, I guess, what we do, that's evolved as well. Like it's all been quite natural. So we started off as very much, traditional like copywriting, and you just get a brief and you'd write some nice content, which was great. We started doing PR for several years. And then a few years ago, we hit the stage where we went from 6 of us in the team to 2 of us in the team within about 4 months. Not for any really bad reasons. People moving overseas, getting headhunted.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But it kind of forced us to re-look at everything that we were doing and decide, did we want to be doing PR? Who were we actually here for? And, who did we want to help? And so it completely transformed the business, and we put this real focus on content, and then eventually on thought leadership content, and a real focus on helping people take all of their ideas and expertise and actually communicate those really well so that they can have a bigger impact and stuff. So it's been very organic, and I wouldn't, looking back, if I look back at high school or uni, I would have had no clue what I would be doing now. I certainly wouldn't think that like thought leadership was a thing.
Wow.
So I think it's been really interesting because it's just always come from what I've been experiencing out in the world and what we've been talking to business owners about, and gone from there kind of.
All right, okay. Well, so there's a few things that give me the heebie-jeebies. One's PR and others bureaucracy. So I'm curious, like there's a concept of cognitive dissonance where you're portraying this and then this is how you feel.
Yeah.
What's it like in the PR space where people try and show their best foot forward and then actually who they are? Like, was it quite interesting to see the back end of PR?
I mean, a lot of the time when we were doing PR, we were working with not-for-profits and who were doing really amazing things. So it was relatively easy to kind of share those stories because they were doing really cool things and they were amazing. And we've got a bit of a like no assholes rule with who we work with. So we're hopefully not working with people who are, out there saying all these amazing things and then doing something completely different at the back. But what we found is that, like, for us, the PR side of it and the actual media relations wasn't really a passion. And with the way that media is changing, it was proving really hard to get good cut through because you had to have, a clickbaity hook, and that's not really how we roll and not really what we're about. So it's one of the main things that drove us to focus much more on the content space and how you can own your own channels and have more of an impact that way, because that didn't always sit quite right. But I think that, if you're a decent business, then you shouldn't be putting out something that's different to what you're doing in-house.
massively.
It's just a case of finding what makes your story interesting. And that's what I think some people struggle with often, is they don't necessarily even think that they have a story or that it's interesting in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I think the key to it, is it's not about putting out something totally different. It's about figuring out how to communicate what already exists and what's already there.
Fair. So there'd be an aspect of self-worth, and there'd be a bit of life coaching a little bit in that sense, where people are like, I don't think I have anything good to say. And then you have to navigate that. So let's say someone comes in like, oh, listen, Verity, I don't feel confident. I don't think anyone wants to listen to me. Like, what should I do? I was trying to pretend to be there.
I guess that would be interesting, because I don't know that would be a client that we would necessarily take on at that point.
All right.
Because my advice would probably be to go and get some help figuring out, to get some confidence. And, what we do now in terms of thought leadership content, you have to be pretty confident to put your ideas out there and to try things. And so, there has to be a level of confidence, not necessarily that they think that they're, the be all and end all, but that they're willing to try things and willing to put themselves out there. So I guess the difference would be that there's a lot of people who don't understand how interesting they are, or don't understand what their story is. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have low self-confidence. They just don't necessarily see in themselves what other people can see in them.
Okay.
So, I guess that would be the difference, really. If someone feels like they have no worth, then probably putting themselves out to the public is not the best way to build that, because you're not always going to get nice feedback either.
I love that, though. Honest feedback.
Yeah. So I feel like that's a internal thing to work on first, and then it's a case of, okay, well, how can you put the focus back on the impact that you're trying to have and the people that you're trying to serve? Because with the clients that we work with, it's not... Yes, it's about building a bigger business, and that's always got to be a driver, because that's, how they live and how they pay people and all of those kind of things. But it's also, they also do it because they want to have a bigger impact. And I think that is often what drives them, where even if they don't think that they're that interesting, they know that what they do and that the ideas they have can be used by other people to have an impact. And so that's kind of the difference, I guess, is they're not just putting stuff out for the sake of it. They know that they're doing it for a reason. So they can kind of get over their own internal, am I really that interesting? Or do I really know what I'm talking about? If the focus is on who they're helping.
That's a good way to navigate it. Because one of the things you were talking about, I thought it would be quite challenging, because that frame of mind where, on some sense, content is a medium to long-term game, or it could just explode and go off well.
Yeah.
But most businesses are looking bottom line. They're like, okay, I'm going to use Google AdWords. I'm going to use this Facebook marketing just to convert.
Yeah.
So I was curious how you would navigate that to thinking more long scope. But it sounds like you go more on the legacy and then more the emotional driver to share what they think. Or
that's definitely part of it. I think the other part of it is that if you're not investing in thought leadership right now, you'll be missing out in 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And so it's not actually, it's still a financial driver. It's just not necessarily a financial driver now. And I think what thought leadership does really well is get you out of the cycle of constantly having to market as much. So if you can get to the point where people come to you and people see you as an authority, and they're willing to buy your book, and they're willing to listen to your podcast, and they're willing to watch your webinars, and they're willing to, read all your content and things, by creating that and consistently putting that out, you are doing the marketing, but you're doing it in a way that you're not then going to have to do, put in another 10 grand or whatever 2 months later to get the next client, because it feeds itself. Okay. So I guess that's part of the conversation, is that it's always about that balance between make sure that you've got enough sales coming in now, and absolutely invest in, the things that are going to get the sales in now. But also, if you want to get off that hamster wheel, this is one of the ways of doing that, essentially. Okay. So I think most of our clients have both of those sides. They've got kind of that altruistic, that they want to help people and they want to have a bigger impact. And they also want to, make sure that they're seen as the authority so that people come to them. So it's I think that's the balance that you've got to strike, because if you're just going out, just after profit, people aren't going to connect with you as much. They're not going to want to follow you as much. Whereas if you're really generous with all of that stuff and the goal is to help people and to have a bigger impact, people will naturally come to you anyway. And in most cases, they're more willing to pay more to come to you as well, because you've already built the trust and you've already helped them and they already know the impact that you can have.
True.
So then they're more willing to go, all right, cool. Now I want you to have an even bigger impact by working with me one-on-one. So I guess it's never just about the impact that they want to have, but it's also, there is a financial element to it as well.
Okay.
But you're right in that sometimes it's hard to convince people to think long term. It's, we tend to work with people who are already thinking that way. So for us, it's not about, exactly. And it's not about convincing people to do it. It's just about finding the people who are like, this is what I want to do. And then going, all right, cool, you can help me get there. So it's, I tend not to go and try and convince the people that are very much focused on the now, because there's enough people out there who are focused on further ahead and are thinking further ahead, and they have some amazing knowledge and ideas to share. So why not just help them get out there? Yeah.
And I imagine the content that you put out attracts a certain type of people. It's like because you do a personal brand side of things, so it's a filter of sorts where people kind of in a way have similar values and relate to you as a person, so that acts as like a filter. So you may not get those assholes, you may not get the short-term thinking, you still would.
You'd still get some,
you can't help that. But where do you think from the financial standpoint, so like we've got the content, it's great. Where do you think people go wrong with the execution to turn that into financial? Because you had the extremes, really nice person doing a lot for everyone, not thinking about business, person only thinking about business and rubbing people the wrong way.
Yeah. It's a really good question. And I think where people miss it is thinking that is not having the idea of how people can come to you. So it's all well and good putting out lots of content, but you have to have a really good idea of, okay, how are you turning that into business and how are you getting that to bring the money in? And that's not about being out there selling things the whole time or having a million lead magnets, but it's knowing that you've got something for people to use. So if you've already got an existing business, say, then it's about going, okay, cool, we're going to use thought leadership as a way of being able to put our prices up, maybe, because we're then seen as the authority. We're going to write a book, say, so that then we can use that as part of our sales process, because people see us as the go-to. There's a bunch of different things you can do there. Or you can go, okay, I've got these ideas, I want to start putting out thought leadership content, I want to start, taking this kind of approach. What are my offerings that tie into the content that I'm putting out there that I can then sell? So whether that's consulting, whether that's coaching, whether that's training, online courses, there's a bunch of different things, but it's making sure that you understand, like, what are you actually trying to get out of it, and knowing that you've got ways for people to come back into you and actually pay you, because you can use a content marketing approach where you use lead magnets and things like that. And thought leadership I see as sort of a lens that goes across all of those, as opposed to being the same thing as content marketing, but you can use a content marketing approach where you're putting out content that leads people into a funnel and bringing them back in. That's totally one option. Or you can go down a completely different path, which is, be out there speaking, write a book, do all of these other things that get you visibility in other ways. And as long as you know how you're then going to make the money off them, because writing a book doesn't tend to make you money these days.
No. Audio maybe, though. Audio, good royalties.
Could do, yeah. But, it's about going, okay, cool, where am I getting the financial return on this? And that's not necessarily where am I getting the financial return tomorrow. It might be in a year or 2 years or 3 years, but knowing that there is a way for people to come and pay you is really important.
Yeah, no doubt. So Okay, so you've got in a sense, you've kind of got an exchange, like Gary V, jab, jab, right hook, give, ask.
Yeah.
So is that sort of the avenue? So you've got this value you're adding and being a thought leader, and then is there a point where there's an exchange? Like, is there a framework in terms of how to turn it from giving great value into making it, I guess, financially sound?
There's no one way, like there's no one framework, because it depends on, how you're doing it and which avenues you're using and which channels. The thing that I would say is, always give first. So the giving needs to come first. And then when you do ask, make sure that it's still in a value-add way. Like most people, if they've been following you for a while, if they've subscribed to your blog or your emails, if they've been watching your videos, if they've been listening to your podcast, they don't mind an ask because they want some other ways of getting value. And in most cases, if you've already built the trust there, then they're going to be willing, or at least a portion of them are going to be willing to spend something to work with you.
Okay.
So I would say, don't be afraid to ask, but also think about how you can use your thought leadership in your sales process in general. So, for example, if your audience is big corporates, then the person in a corporate that you're talking to isn't necessarily going to be listening to your podcast every time or, subscribe to your emails or whatever. But if you can go in and during it give them a book or talk about how you've got this audience that you've been, engaging with on a podcast or whatever, that can be used as well. And so it's thinking about, all right, maybe I've got an article that's relevant to this point in the sales process. Can I send that through as a way to give extra value? So It's not always about like doing give, ask. Sometimes it's about going, actually, what's all this other stuff that I can use as part of my existing process too? So there's no one framework, which I know isn't as helpful. But what I would say is basically just remember to find the balance, and that give, ask is actually quite a good way of thinking about it. It's like always give at least double the amount that you're asking. But don't be afraid to ask once in a while as well, and focus on what the value is for your audience, because they know that they want that value from you because they're already trying to get it from all of your other channels. So give it to them in a way that's going to help them. One of the other things that we talk about a little bit is applied knowledge versus unapplied knowledge. So on a blog or in a book or in a podcast or things like that, that's all pretty unapplied knowledge. Like it's kind of all this theory, all of the stuff that I'm talking about is all theory. Whereas through to applied knowledge is like if you're doing it with clients and you're applying all of those ideas and those frameworks and models and things to what you're doing with one specific client, that's really applied. So often the price and the value goes up the more applied it gets, because I can read a book. I might implement some of it. I might not. I read a lot of books and I implement very little, let's be honest. But it gives me ideas. So then the ones that I really connect with, I might then go, oh, is there a little course that I could do? Oh, okay, maybe I'll do a course. Oh, okay, that was really good. I'd really like to work with, I'd like them to come into our business and consult with us and help us. Cool, I'm going to pay more for that. So thinking about how that price ladder, I guess, goes down that unapplied through to applied ladder is really, really helpful to think about, okay, well, at what points am I asking for something versus giving it away for free? Because unapplied knowledge, give is my, like, just give it all away, because then that helps you become known as the authority and people like you and they want to work with you. So
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have trepidation around giving their best content out for free.
Yeah.
But what people pay for, I use a different word, it's called personalization.
Yeah.
So it's tailoring it to them. And they always talk about that cost is only a problem in the absence of value, and that value comes from that applied knowledge.
Yeah.
I'd be curious from the thought leadership side of things, because you talked about finding something interesting that they can convey.
Yeah.
Do you find where they go wrong? Where do people aren't quite conveying the interest, or they're being too salesy, or?
Yeah, being too salesy is probably one of the main ones. Like it's leading with the we or the I is often one of the big things. So I'll often challenge people to like flip it and go, you can share your own thoughts and go, oh, I've been thinking about this, blah, 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 blah. But as soon as it's like, I do this really well, or I got this amazing result or something, it's fine. And,
LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Look at
totally.
me.
And look, you've got to do some bragging. You've always got to do some bragging. But, if you can flip it and go, this is what you can achieve if you use this framework or this idea, or, I've been exploring this idea. What do you think? And actually getting people engaged in it. Having that flip of thinking from it being about you and what you care about to your audience is vital, because also we all care more about what we do than our audience does. So thinking about what it actually means for them is so much more powerful.
Yeah, massive.
So that would probably be one of the big things. What was the question again?
Where people go wrong with their content, basically. Simple terms.
Yeah, so other places they go wrong is trying to be the same as everyone else.
Yeah, okay.
So looking at their competitors and going, oh, they're doing that, maybe I'll do that. And to a certain extent, absolutely, if someone's doing something really well, then yeah, sure, get some inspiration from there. But people connect with you because of who you are and your, what makes you unique as a person and as a business. So trying to always take things further is our advice. It's going, you can pull ideas from other people and from the conversations that you have and from other people's frameworks and things, but then go, okay, well, what can I bring to this conversation? So, for example, if you are a leadership coach, so there's a bunch of leadership coaches out there and there's a bunch of different frameworks and models and things. So it might be going, oh, I really respect this model that this other thought leader or coach has done. Here's something that I can bring to it. So it might be in my work with, one-man bands or something, I discovered that, and then add an extra learning. So always thinking about what you can bring to it to move the conversation, forward is, it's really powerful.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, the tea's getting cold.
It's getting
so
cold.
Enjoy. And I'd be curious to explore more about this thought leadership side of things, because it makes conceptual sense to me where, okay, the good thing as well, from a personal brand side of things, people were like, oh, I've got to look for my niche, but you're the niche.
Yeah.
So that's also added benefit. So I just, how far can you go into this thought leadership and this process that you guys have? And tell us what you, unapplied knowledge that you're willing to share.
Absolutely. I mean, you can go as far as you want. So we believe that thought leadership is built on 4 things. So feel, act, think, and lead. Okay. So feel is it's the emotion. It's your why. If you're going to be out there as a thought leader, you're probably going to be driven by a purpose. So for us, we are completely driven by the fact that we feel like there's a lot of noise out there, and the people who have the most amazing ideas tend to be kept quietly away and aren't the ones out there. And so we get these kind of average ideas and kind of average content and kind of average everything. So we want the people who have these really amazing transformative ideas to be heard. So think about what's driving you and why you're doing it. And, it's the whole Simon Sinek start with why that's kind of, everyone uses that now, but it's true, and there's a reason for it, and that's because that's what will keep you going as well. We've talked about thought leadership being a really long-term approach, so you gotta have something driving you if you're gonna keep that up. So that's the first part, is the feel, thinking about what drives you. Secondly is think. So there's a reason that thought leader, that one of the words of that is thought, and that's because your thinking actually has to be good. So, we tend to work mostly with service businesses because they tend to be the ones who have the ideas. That's not to say that someone who has a product business can't be a thought leader, but if you're making one thing and then never changing anything, you're probably not going to be in a position to be a thought leader, because it requires coming up with some new ideas and improving the way that things are done and consistently looking for ways to make things better. So that thinking part is really important. It's going, okay, what are the models and frameworks that I use to deliver what I do? So if you are an IT consultancy, for example, what have you built your services on? It's thinking about, okay, is there some way that I can convey what I do really well in a way that other people can then step on board and be able to do that really well? So, for example, we've got a client who we're in the midst of helping him with his book, which will be out very soon, which is exciting. And
we can shout them out. I don't mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to shout it out yet, or whether it's
secret.
still hush hush until it's out. We'll see. But he's writing a book with another guy, and we've been helping them, and they're in the robotic process automation field, which you think, okay, cool, technology, sure. Yep. Okay. We were a little bit like, do we want to help write a book about RPA? Who knows? But what the perspective that they come from is that you can't enact technology change unless you actually think about people. And so automating things and creating a digital workforce is all about change management, and it's all about the strategy as opposed to the technology. The technology is kind of the end. So they've built this framework around it. The digital colleague adoption framework, I believe, is the framework that it's built on. So doing that thinking and thinking about, okay, well, what can somebody apply to their own life or their own business is really important. And the other part that comes in there as well is challenging your thinking. So as we've said, there's lots of noise out there. There's a lot of people out there with an opinion. So we always suggest that clients, and it's often the role that we play, actually challenge their thinking and go, all right, if I had to argue against this, what would I argue against it? What are the devil's advocates out there saying? What are people already saying, and how am I moving the conversation forward? Am I moving the conversation forward? So doing all of that thinking means that then you come out to market and your idea might not be perfect. It might not be in the perfect form, and that's actually cool and good because you want to get feedback and find out what people think. But at least you've that it's not just throwing something out there for the sake of throwing something out there, that there's kind of a reason for it, and it's thought through and it makes sense. So that's feel, think, and then the third part is act, and that's your stories and the proof. So it's why we tend to work with business owners, because they've already built up businesses and they've already got experience and they've done these things. So I sometimes feel a little bit underqualified to be out there like talking about stuff because I still feel like I'm quite young, but then I'm like, well, we've built a business, that's okay, at least we've done some of it and we're out there doing it with clients. But I think that it's why you don't tend to see sort of 20-year-old thought leaders. You might see 20-year-old influencers, but thought leaders tend to be people who've got some experience behind them. So they've proven the frameworks that they're using. They've proven the ideas that they're using. They might have hypotheses that they've gone out and actually gone, yeah, I know that works because I've done that with a client, or I've sent this to someone and they've been able to implement it. So thinking about the stories that prove your ideas, that's incredibly important. So client success stories, not from the perspective of we did this to help this client, but more of like, what has your client achieved? Like, how are they the hero? And you guys just helped them out. So that's act. And then finally it's lead. And that's the part that I think a lot of business owners get stuck on, is actually putting themselves out there, and again, thought leader, the second part of it is the lead part. And so going out there and trying to inspire people and get people to follow you and giving people the tools to be able to do some of that themselves. So we'll often talk to clients about like, well, what kind of leader do you aspire to be in your business? Because you're probably going to aspire to be the same sort of thought leader. Like if you're the type of person who wants to empower other people, then your thought leadership should do the same thing. It should empower other people to take action. If you're the type of leader who likes being the authority and and knowing all the answers, then cool, that's what your thought leadership might be as well. Okay. If you're the kind of leader who likes to get ideas from everyone and collaborate, great. Maybe the way that you show thought leadership is by facilitating conversations between really smart people. So thinking about how you're going to lead and put yourself out there is really important. all the tactics of which channels you're going to use and which platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's podcast. I always recommend that people build up a database because they own that and control that, as opposed to social media you don't control. Whether you're going to do speaking, whether you're going to do webinars, there's so many options. So it's about deciding what's the best way, A, to reach your audience, and B, for you to feel like you can do that consistently and effectively, because if you're not going to do it consistently and effectively, then what's the point?
True. That's where the why comes in the drive.
Yeah, exactly.
You talked about devil advocacy and with your debating. It'd be quite a useful insight to get on that, like, because that's the challenge. People sort of try and reinforce what they already know instead of trying discovering the truth.
Yeah.
Well, the best we know.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate being a devil advocate or helping someone realize, hey, you've got a certain bias here, or there's a certain way you're thinking that's not enhancing your thought leadership?
Yeah. It's just about questions, really. And I think you can ask them of yourself, but it's really helpful to have somebody else ask them as well. So whether it's a friend or a partner or a colleague or an external person, there's something about somebody else asking you questions that's really useful. So some of the types of questions that we would ask are literally, okay, if you had to argue against yourself, what would the other side be? And like get them actually thinking that way.
Okay.
And yeah, the debating side of it definitely comes into it for me, because I spent, all of my high school years kind of learning how to argue both sides of something, or arguing against what I actually believed in, because that was the side that I had to do. So what are the devil's advocates saying? There'd be things like, okay, well, why do you believe that? Why do you think that? Let's look at how that's proven. Are there any examples that disprove it? Are there ways in which you could improve on it? Or are there things that other people are saying that maybe achieve the result better? So just starting to really question it. And it's not to say that like you shouldn't put an idea out there before it's ready, because I also think that one of the best ways to figure out whether an idea is good is just to put it out there. So that's how I'll use LinkedIn a lot of the time, is ask a question and test things out, because it's not in a form, like a book or anything that takes that much time. It's a good way to kind of test out what people think. But yeah, I think the key there is that if you're going to be a thought leader or going to attempt to, build thought leadership, you have to not be afraid to have someone disagree with you, because that's what makes your ideas strong, is if you're able to have someone go like, no, I think that's bullshit, and completely disagree. And then either that helps you improve your idea, or you're able to argue against it and go, no, actually, I know that this is solid. That either gives you the confidence that you've got a really solid idea, or it helps you make your idea better. So either way, you win. Yeah, exactly.
Fair. Stumbled off there, but one of the other things you talked about is finding your why. So I'd be curious, why are you doing this? Because you stumbled into it. Yeah. Or maybe what's your long-term vision in a general sense, whatever you can tie into, but what would be your why?
Yeah.
Your feel?
Yeah.
Does it feel? Yeah.
Yeah. So for us as a business, it's very much about lifting some of those voices up that we don't think are getting heard. And for me, I guess there's sort of two things driving me. One is still very much that. It's very much I want the people who are really smart to be heard. And personally, I really like talking to interesting people. I'm driven by making the world better through smart people talking to each other. And I think that there is for such a connected world, we're really disconnected. And so I get really passionate and really excited about the idea that actually we could just make things better if people talked to each other and shared their ideas more openly and weren't afraid to have criticism and, all of those kind of things. So for me personally, it's very much about how can I have conversations with as many people as possible and then lift up the people that I think are really interesting and that I think have lots to contribute to the world, and bring them to the forefront, because that's how I think we're going to solve some things. Like, I don't think you solve problems in silos. I think you solve them when you talk to each other, and then you realize that how you're gonna can fix things together. So for me personally, that's always been a real driver is how to bring people together and then elevate the ones that, I think should have a voice in the conversation, essentially.
Was there someone that didn't have a voice? Was it you? Was it someone you knew? Or when you were a kid?
Oh, that's bullies? A good question. I've always had a voice. I'm very loud.
Great projection.
Yeah, it was at my wedding. That was my mum and dad's speech mentioned how loud I was at least 10 times. And same thing at my 21st, actually, now that I think back. So that's never been a factor for me personally. But I think what I've always seen is that I was born with a bit of weird self-confidence, and I'm not sure where it came from.
Okay.
But I've always felt very confident, and I've never had a problem putting my voice out there. And then I would meet all these amazing people, like my friends, and now through business and stuff, that I think are far smarter than me and have far better ideas and are really interesting, and they're so afraid to speak up or put their voices out. And I was just like, but just do it. And so I think it was this frustration that everything that I could see in people, they weren't seeing it in themselves and they weren't putting themselves forward. And I think that that's where it came from, is I was like, I just really need everyone else to feel as good about themselves as I feel about myself, which sounds like bragging. I don't mean it to be that way, but I just think that's where it came from, is wanting other people to be able to feel confident to throw themselves out there and see what happens.
All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, self-confidence, I guess, in the world is a little bit of a crime in a sense, as though it's like you should be ashamed. You should buy this product because you're not enough. You should do that.
Yeah.
And you get force-fed it all the time. So it is quite refreshing to see someone that feels self-assured and a certain competency. But I'd be, for all those voices that want to be heard and are smart, what would be your final thing you'd like to say to them? And then also, what's the best way to reach you?
Oh, okay. Final thing would be just to try it. So I was talking to a group of women yesterday about how perfection is the enemy of progress. And it's definitely something that we're still in the process of learning. But I think that it's very true, is that actually sometimes you just have to throw yourself out there and see what people connect with. And more often than not, you'll be surprised by how much people do connect with you. So that doesn't mean throwing yourself out there as in you have to put yourself on video or you have to do something that you're really uncomfortable with, because I know that not everyone is comfortable in those sort of arenas. But throw up a LinkedIn post with what an idea that you've had, or talk to some clients about something that you're considering, or even tell your family and friends about what you're doing. I feel like that's something we always miss out on. Certainly, I'm not entirely sure that my family knows what I do. Yeah. So put it out there and see what they think. But just try it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's much more important to just start getting feedback and start that conversation. So that would be the key thing. And as for reaching me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people there. I've met some really good friends through LinkedIn, met you through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So Verity Craft on LinkedIn. I would send you to our website. Hopefully by the time this goes out, our brand new website might be up, because our old ones, I get a little bit embarrassed sending people there.
Dear.
But we've got a new one on the way, which is intelligentinc.co.nz. But yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's always a good place to reach me anyway.
Okay, well, I'll gauge it. There'll be a link in the description. Turns to your LinkedIn guaranteed. The website, we'll think about it.
Yeah. Depends when this comes out, maybe.
Yeah, we'll play it out. And yeah, anyone listening on that ending point, start small, start now. And also, so people can hear from great people that are smarter than me, sharing voices and intelligent. Well, subscribe.
Yeah, absolutely.
You also got to chuck in a review, because then otherwise we don't rank, and you got to get us up there so more people can see it. And once again, thanks to nzaudioeditors.com, because, that would be annoying as fuck if I had to do it every day. So thank you, Jordan Greville. Cheers, guys.